Alright guys, welcome back to another one. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the PS5, PS4 version of the recently released Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus to that of the PS3 version, part of the Sly Trilogy. After long wait, it would seem that Sony are finally bringing back PlayStation 2 games to the PlayStation Classics catalog. Now these games are running on Sony's brand new PS2 Emulator, so this is different compared to the older PS2 games part of the Classics catalog and the way that they operate. However, the differences aren't huge. The only additional things that you get out of this new emulator is new features like screen filters and the ability to be able to rewind back to a point in gameplay, just like the PSP and PS1 emulator on PS4 and PS5 can do. The Sly one on the PS4 and 5 is interesting. I would say that this is a bit of a disappointing release to a certain degree. I was hoping that with this new PlayStation 2 emulator, we would see further enhancements beyond what we got for Sony's previous PS2 releases, but that's simply not the case here. Now, this is quite literally the PS2 version of the game. That means that all of the different kinks and things that the PS2 version has, you're going to receive. For instance, we have no widescreen. The original game never released with widescreen support. This means that the game runs in 4:3. The same can also be said for Sony's old PS2 emulation as well. For the games that were never supported for 16:9 widescreen, they simply stayed in their 4:3 aspect ratios. So for games that did support widescreen, like the Jack Trilogy, those games will in fact play 16:9. I was hoping that for this new emulator, widescreen would be something for specifically PS2 games that would be supported. The mention of up-rendering got me pretty excited, but ultimately it is a bit disappointing here. The game runs at a native 480p resolution. However, it is upscaled to 1080i. This means that in a way, the resolution here is actually better than what we have for the PlayStation 3 version, which runs at 720p. That's why the picture here for the PS4 and 5 version comes across clearer than the PS3 version. The game does run at 60 frames per second so long as you're playing the NTSC version, whereas the PAL version will play at 50 frames. This was standard for PAL region games back in the day. Though this is an uncapped frame rate, so it does have like tendencies to sort of drop below that sometimes. However, in the original version, there is a lot of motion blur. To be sure that you are playing the NTSC version, you can switch what version of the game you're playing by pressing start. You'll notice here that the original version of Sly was a lot darker in comparison to the PlayStation 3 HD versions. It's almost like they upped the brightness slider a little bit for PlayStation 3. To be fair, I actually prefer the darker look here on the original version. Also, the black outlines as part of the sort of cel shading look for the Sly games is definitely more prominent in the original versions. And you can tell here with us playing on the PS2 emulator on PS5 that they just stand out. They're a lot more bold compared to that PS3 version. It would seem as if Sanzera Games, the guys responsible for putting the Sly games to PS3, actually toned down the character outlines. I can't find a definitive answer anywhere as to why this is the case, but it just looks so much better with the thicker black outlines around the characters. It helps the character of Sly and other character models stand out in the game. However though, with all of that taken into account, this pretty much means that the PS3 trilogy still to this day is, by official means, the definitive way of being able to experience the Sly games. You get the widescreen, you also get slightly enhanced textures, along with that too you get 60 frames per second. The only real benefit you get here for the PS4 and 5 versions is, yeah, the resolution comes across a little bit clearer, though the internal native resolution is lower. The features are also nice, I suppose, for rewind and screen filters, but still to this day, I would definitely prefer to play the PS3 trilogy. What's cool though is, this means that Sly is easily accessible now. You can simply just go over to the PlayStation Store and purchase the game and just play it from your current system. No need to actually plug in your PlayStation 3 to be able to play at least looking at Sly 1. Fingers crossed that both 2 and 3 come to the catalog as well. Also, there is a totally separate trophy list here, and interestingly enough, there are a bunch of different trophies. I would say that the platinum for this version of Sly 1 is actually harder to get than the PS3 trilogy version. Now, instead of individual bronze trophies for collecting each of the abilities, you now have silver trophies for opening all of the vaults in each of the hub worlds. There's also specific little challenge trophies here for doing doing certain things in levels, like complete a cunning disguise without the barrel, or destroy 7 panes of glass in back alley heist. This is kinda neat because it gives you additional things to do in the game, and especially comparing the platinum of the PS3 version, which is just so easy, this is a nice change. However, in a perfect world, what would have been better here is to receive the PS3 version of the game with some additional enhancements. Of course though, PlayStation 3 emulation is currently not a thing. Now, if you're asking me what the truly definitive way is of experiencing all of the Sly games with 60 frames and 4K resolution, well, that would be RPCS3, the PlayStation 3 emulator. This footage right here is of all of the games running on that emulator at 4K 60 frames per second, and it looks simply gorgeous. And it's just so disappointing that even though these emulators exist and have existed for such a long time, this is still to this day something that the PlayStation 5 doesn't do. It's insane to think that with all the money a company like Sony has, they still can't get an experience like this available on PlayStation systems. What you're looking at right here is the PS3 version, so you're going to have all of the additional enhancements that the original HD Trilogy introduced, but just with that 4K resolution, which looks absolutely incredible. Sly has this really unique cell shading cartoony type art style, and at higher resolutions it makes that art style stand out all the more. There have been rumors over the years suggesting that Sony have been quietly working in the background to try get PS3 emulation running on PS5 systems. These are just rumors, and there's been actually quite a lot of them. I could honestly see PlayStation 3 emulation popping up at some point later on down the line, considering that as of right now it kind of seems like Sony are taking a firm stance on bringing more of PlayStation's classic games to modern systems. PS3 though is a different can of worms compared to looking at PSP, PS1, and PS2, just because of the architecture type that system uses compared to the older systems is a lot more complex. Again though, it's that whole thing of like, it's just simply insane that a group of people can band together and make an emulator that makes these games able to be played at very high resolutions with additional enhancements, but a multi-billion-dollar company like Sony can't put out an emulator for their own system. So the verdict here with Sly on PS5 and 4 is that it's just fine. It is a little bit disappointing. I was hoping for further enhancements with this brand new PS2 emulator, but unfortunately it's just not here. It's essentially the same as the older one, like I said, just with those additional features. This is a totally viable way of playing Sly. The game is still absolutely fun, even though it is running at technically 480p and 30 frames per second at 4:3 ratio. It's cool to have that ease of access for at least the first game as of right now. For those wondering too, yes, you can buy this individually. You do not need a PlayStation Plus premium membership in order to play it. However guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to let me know if you are currently indulging back through Sly 1. I'd love to know. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with all the antics going on here. Check out my other garbage social media platforms. Links in the description below. Thank you so much to my wonderful patrons. I appreciate the support. I hope each and every one of you are having a fantastic day, and we'll talk real soon.